To hear me talk about stuff and cups. My name's Juan, Cups Cortes. If you want to know the nickname, we can chat about it later. But due to time, we'll skip that story. There's my Twitter handle, Congo86. I work at Palo Alto Networks with the Global Security Response Team. So it's a new team, and I work particularly with the malware reversing team. So we reverse all things. This is sort of the outline. I don't know why that question mark's there, but anyways, we're gonna do I don't know what happened here. Anyways, we're gonna talk what's autofocus, then we're gonna do cool things to do in autofocus, story time, and then some reversing. There's gonna be a lot of cups, so embrace it and hope you have a good time. So what is autofocus? It's just another threat intel platform. Yes, another one. Basically, autofocus is a huge data set with about 600 million samples that we dynamically analyze from our wildfire system. We build reports on it, and then we can query all those samples, all those reports, and we have all the session data, and you'll see what I'm talking about with the session data. In the back end, it's all Elastic and Hadoop. A lot of magic in the back end that I'm not familiar with. But anyways, so the autofocus is really focused into kind of two groups. Security operationals group. You receive these things called tags. Tags are just contextual meanings to your searches, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. You assess and find relevance to this intel. You apply it to your infrastructure, and you're all good. You're preventing things. The other one is the threat analyst people, which is, you search IOC samples. You correlate all this data. You build intel on malware, attribution, campaign, etc., and you build these tags, intel, and you're good to go. So that's sort of a threat intel analyst job, what I feel like it is. So let me show you real quick. It's a live demo. Hopefully, I figured it would work better if we do it live. So let's see here. Cool. Let's make this fit here. Perfect. So it's gonna shrink it a lot, but it's all good. So I'm gonna navigate through here. Dashboard of autofocus, graphs, etc. Cool graphs, maps. Totally killed the way you can look at tags here, but it's all good. No worries. So we can do behavioral searches on all these malwares that we collect. What's a behavior? So we currently detect about 300 different behaviors in Wildfire. We can detect and then make a decision based on those behaviors. So for example, here I'm just really quickly searching for behaviors of long sleep. So anything that sleeps for a long time, registry changes, anything that sets itself for auto start, anything that writes to the Windows folder. And then I kind of narrowed it down to this date. It's not specifically for this demo. It's just this is what I feel comfortable with, and this is what I practice on. So we search it. Searching it, and then all samples because I have a research account, and we get about 26,000 samples, all malware, and then you see some of these tags are private, so for my team, etc. And then these ones with the little icon there for Unit 42, they're public. So you can start seeing things, right? All malware, DLLs. What else can you do with it? You can do for DNS activity, so anything that's trying to reach out there. So it cut it off here, but again. Search it. All samples. We get how many samples do we get? 33, and they're all Palo Alto musical chairs. There's a blog post out there if you're interested into what that is. HTTP activity. We can search for HTTP post, get all the regular HTTP user agents, and did I search for that one? Yeah, samples. So, again, multi-plug, it's a shitty malware. I mean, not malware, sorry, adware. Not malware. Don't quote me on that one. I'll get in trouble. It's adware. Anyways, you can also search for file activity, process activity, registry. And then I threw a couple in behaviors there. And then you can search for that. And that's taking a while. We'll do samples. There you go. So, bot track malware. Cool. And last but not least, you can also search for, mutex activity. The sort of This one, you can search for, see, this one comes up as poison ivy. Okay. That's it for the demo, right? This is kind of what you do in autofocus. Now, let's come over to, here. Let's go back to the time. Story time. So we get all this intel, all these reports from our intel people at work, or me just looking at autofocus like I showed you, and we were getting reports that there was this malware that wasn't detonating correctly in our wildfire system for whatever reason. So we wanted to know what it was, right? So this malware happened to be a Patre. Nothing new. It's been around since 2013. It's extremely relevant or prevalent in the autofocus in our Intel platform, 600,000 samples. It's a downloader. It downloads more malware. You can find more references online. I linked a link there if you're interested. So I just want to show you real quick what that report looks like in autofocus. Very low activity there. Not a lot you can go off of. This is kind of the VT report, just for historical reasons. You know, very low detections. There's another one fairly new back in October 1st. Again, not a lot of activity there you can really go off and say, oh, this is definitely malware. On the top there, you see wildfire verdict malware. We manually flipped that. So, but essentially when we had looked at this, it was benign. So definitely, you know, caught your eye, whatever. Same thing, same sample out of, well, the one I showed you previously and the VT. So time to reverse, right? This is where I get to have fun. This is where I, you know, get to fill my cup with reversing joy. So initial analysis really quick. Throw it in VM, change the name to it, exe, and it's a PDF icon, right? Real fishy. Version info with CFF Explorer, PE parser if you're familiar with it. If not, you know, can definitely talk to you more about it later. But, you know, we get some version info there that's, you know, iffy and fishy right off the bat. The other thing I like to look at too is the PE sections. So if you're familiar with the PE file format, particularly this one caught my attention, the .data section, because you can see the virtual size is hex 1128 and the raw size is hex 800. What does that mean? If you're not familiar with it, it basically means that there's either code that's going to be written to that section or it's packed and it's going to unpack in memory. Again, just to kind of show you, you know, we're definitely looking at malware. It's not, you know, it's predictable, right? We're not dealing with anything that's, oh my God, it's trying to hide itself. So, again, what initial dynamic analysis, threw it up in FakeNet, or launch FakeNet, process monitor. You can see I ran it 3 times. All 3 times. If you're familiar how process monitor works, the little green toolbar here just shows you how long it's been running for. You know, ran very, very little, and then it exited. So, what is it doing? What's going on? Okay, now we're really going to get to reverse real things. So, starting with IDA shots. So I wasn't sure how to present this to you guys, but, you know, well, if you have any questions at the end of the talk, just shoot me, you know, talk to me. So when you put it up in IDA, it basically a very simple code flow. It tries to set up a typical Windows window. And in order to do that, you have to call a bunch of Windows 32 API, and one of them is register class, which just registers your window to the Windows system. It pushes one argument, which is the window class structure. That structure has a member called WinProc, which is just the Windows callback that gets called every time you interact with the window. So that's what we're interested in, because this is what it looks like. That's the Windows callback, and that's the particular code block that we're interested in. What does that look like? So I named a couple of things there. Not the best naming convention, but I just wanted to show you how, you know, when you reverse, you don't go and know right off the bat, you know, I'm going to name this. This is the malware code, or, you know, this is the global variable that it uses for something. You know, it's just, as you reverse, you just name things and whatever works for you. So, obviously, we're interested in that global variable something D word, because it gets pushed to the stack, you know, in the ESX value. We trace it back, it's obviously coming from ECI. ECI gets its time from that global variable. Where is that global variable coming from? What is it doing? So again, in the same Windows callback, you see that, I should have highlighted better, but in the something D word, you can see it's getting added from some value in ECX. We don't care where it's coming from. At the bottom, same thing. It's whatever value is at EAX is getting added to that something D variable. And it's how's it being used. So, excuse me. So going back to that code block that we're interested in, this is basically it, right? Again, keeping track that ECX, hold our global variable, is moving to EAX, and it's calling to the other code location. And this is what it looks in IDA. So keep in mind that value from offset, it's getting moved to EDX, and it's getting subtracted from EAX. And what was EAX holding? Our global variable, right? And what did that turn out to be? Well, it then exchanges it with EAX and EDX, and then now EAX holds that new value that's been subtracted and from that global variable, and it's getting pushed to the stack. And you'll see why it's getting pushed to the stack. I kind of gave it away at the with the comment section, but eventually code makes it down to the jump in that location, which is just doing this. It's adding one to ECX and returning. If you're familiar with code flow, what is it returning to? We never called anything. How is it going to return to something that doesn't know? Well, if you're familiar how assembly works, returning just whatever's on top of the stack pops into EIP and starts executing there. So what was on top of the stack was our EAX value, which was, figure out from the offset, subtracted from our global variable that was added in the code before, and it lands here. So IDA has not disassembled this for you. You could just go and get to the address that we're interested in is 402AE9 and press C for code, and then disassemble this for you, right? Cool, this is all good. We're getting somewhere. Just another thing I wanted to show you how IDA handles things. Here at the bottom there, IDA is telling you that it's labeled a chunk code location 402E72, but the actual code is jumping plus 2 bytes from that location. So if you go to that location in IDA, the first 2 instructions make no sense if you're familiar with assembly or if you're familiar looking at typical malware. I don't even know what that instruction does, but we can go ahead and change that. So basically what we do is go to IDA, press D, change all those to data bytes, go back to the right location, which is 402E74, press C, and you have the code. Now it makes more sense. The first 2 instructions obviously flow better with the code. At this point, I haven't showed you an impersonation, but I'm obviously debugging it and doing IDA at the same time. At this point, there's nothing more I can show you here in IDA that's beneficial. But essentially, this is what I do. F7 throughout the code loop, throughout the code all the time, skipping all the uninteresting parts, and I'll show you why. So here, just want to show you how the code starts decoding itself. Here we have a loop. It's XORing, subtracting values, and storing them somewhere else. So kind of hard to visualize, but focus maybe on 2 or 3 bytes, and then that's before the code loop. And then after the code loop, code has changed. It's decoded itself. Cool, right? It does this a couple of times where that's why I'm, Homer with the little stick, just F7 while I find something interesting. Eventually we get to a Windows 32 API call, which is virtual protect. Virtual protect basically just changes the memory protections on a memory page. And for example, here it's changing it on hex 41,000. 41,000, if you look at a memory map, is obviously the .text section of this malware sample, which already has page execute and read. But it's obviously going to add write, and you'll see why in a minute. So eventually, again, F7, and we land to call EAX. EAX holds that hex 41,000. And I didn't show you here, but if you were to debug this and then step into this call and then look at IDA and go to that memory location and look at the code, it's not going to be the same. IDA probably won't even disassemble it for you because the code, it's obviously not decoded. So that's why debugging was necessary at this point or beyond this point. But and you think you're done, right? We're obviously decoded a section. Now we're looking at Windows 32 API calls, but there's more. Again, quickly show you how the code starts to decode itself. So as I reverse this and you start seeing code flows and you start not memorizing, but recognizing different code chunks, you start labeling things. So in Ali, I've labeled that call to decode PE. Doesn't decode the PE, doesn't mean it decodes the whole PE file. It's just, that's what I named it at that time. But again, focus on those instructions there. If you notice, they don't really much make sense, right? You're moving D pointer values from ECI plus hex 9E, F9, really not with the code flow. After that call, after we step over that call, we have obviously instructions that make sense. So again, kind of show you that you need to, can't really do this statically. You kind of have to debug it. Cool. So eventually we make it to this code block and you start seeing it's calling things off the stack. I'm like, okay, so maybe we're done, but there's more stuff. So do I show you here? No. So I step into that call, EVP -8, just off the stack, which goes to that location. And I'm presenting with, again, F7 code until I find something interesting. Here, if you're not familiar with it, this is just decoding the APIs with some math XORing. Again, I didn't mention this earlier, and I apologize, I missed it. But when we reverse, something that my boss has taught me is you have to have a goal when you reverse. You can't just go in a file and start reversing every single instruction or figuring out what every code block is doing. Unless that's your goal, that's fine. But for example, for here, we already know it's a Patre, so we don't need to identify the malware. We already know that what a Patre does. We can look up in Google hundreds of different reports of what a Patre does. We're interested into why is it not running within our system, and that's our goal, right? So here we don't care, but once we make it out of there, it starts storing you can't really see it clear, but EAX holds the function pointer to Windows 32 API calls now. So this one's create process, and it's storing it to memory location, whatever, pointing at EDI. EDI is off the stack at that moment, so it's starting to build the API calls onto the stack. So we were here, I stepped into that call, we come out of it, and you start seeing API calls, right? Start seeing get tick count, get module file name, create process. Great success. I think we made it. We have Windows 32 API calls now. I think we're inside with the actual malware is doing. So then we stepped over the get tick count. It compares it to some value that get tick count returns, and if it's below, it jumps down to exit process, which is it just quits. It's done. And this is kind of where we figured out what it was doing, right? Get tick count, it's a Windows API that checks, that returns the value in milliseconds since the system's been up 49.7 days. So going back, you can see that get tick count gets called. And the value that's comparing it, it's hex, my cheesy word point, whatever. Hex 08FC80, which is close to 12 minutes. So the Apache sample was checking whether the system was up for 12 minutes. If it wasn't, it exited out and just didn't do any of the cool stuff that it was meant to do. Again, we don't care what that cool stuff was doing. We just care why it wasn't running. We figured it out. We moved on. My cup has been filled. We improved the platform with obviously better detection for these kind of anti-analysis techniques. And we can go back to playing cups. And that's it. I'll leave you with more cup knowledge. I don't know if I'm in time, but good? Awesome. When I practiced this, I was going over like 2 minutes. So if you have any questions, if not, hope you guys learned something. I know some of the disassembly and the reversing, I went through it quickly, but if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to sit down and talk to you about it. Yep. Right now it's just 2, me and my boss. So it's Richard Wortel, if you know him or heard him. And we're hiring. If you're a reverser and you want to reverse with us, let me know.
How did you get the initial notice of that?
So from our trend intel guys. So in autofocus, we saw that that's what our intel guys do, right? They already know how stuff works, and they were getting information from either autofocus reports or from the intel engines that they have in the back end. They figured things out. So this is kind of how we work. So I love intel, and I'll do it, but I'm not the best at it. And they love reversing, but they're not the best at it. So we kind of complement each other. Right. So this is where I jump in, debugging IDA and figure out why it was not detonating correctly. Yep. Any questions? No? Okay. I'm sorry? Yeah, we figured out what it was doing. We talked to our wildfire system, which is the developers that develop all the backend for that. We told them, hey, this is what's going on. You guys should, hook this API call and, return something else. And so actually Cuckoo does a good job of catching it too. So I think that's how they caught it, because they ran it on our Cuckoo instance, and Cuckoo did a better job, and then so yeah. Real time reversing it took me maybe about a day. So it was a day of just F7 stepping through it. So yeah. Any more questions? Cool. So I was told that I guess Palo Alto is giving you guys a nest, whoever wins. So if you haven't had a chance to put your business card in here, no? You want it? Okay. Maybe we have a couple more minutes. Anybody else? Okay. Let's see. Oh. Anybody else? All right, you guys got to come running up here, because. Cool. Who's Andy? I can't pronounce his last name. I'm sorry. He's a consumer energy. You? Oh man. All right, I'm done, guys. If you guys want to chat more, just hit me up afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Appreciate it.